It begins in an all-girls Catholic school in 1995. A girl narrates that she has been in Santa Lucia longer than she can remember. She heard so many stories about the place that it became hard to separate myths from the truth. But she knows one story to be true. At the end of the third-floor corridor, a girl named Erica in a comfort room. No one dares to go there anymore. Then, we see many of the girl students occupying a room. One has a blindfold on while playing a game with two others. It is a game that involves trust. Suddenly, the door opens, causing everyone to quickly return to their beds. A nun walks in to verbally discipline them, stating she instructed the girls to go to sleep hours ago. Since they disobeyed, they have to be ready to confess their sins tomorrow. When the nun, Alice, leaves, we see the students lying on mattresses on the floor. One of them sits up and asks her friend, Joyce, to accompany her in going to the washroom. The next scene has the girl walking alone in the hallway with a flashlight. It seems like Joyce rejected her request. As she walks, we can see she is somewhat scared. The door to the washroom turns out to be locked, which prompts her to walk upstairs. Opening the door to the comfort room, the girl hesitates to enter. Once she does, she has to search for a stall she can use. After using one, she washes her hands while the door creaks behind her. So she looks at it for some time, until someone grabs her from behind, causing the girl to scream. In another room, Alice hears it. The scene changes completely to show us the nuns of the school getting their pictures taken. One lady, who isn't a nun, also goes through the process. The students participate as well. Later, in the darkroom, one nun notices the picture of the other lady. She hands it to her, slightly concerned that she is not smiling in the photo. That lady, whose name is Pat, tells the nun it's okay. She probably had a lot on her mind, especially after what happened to the girl she calls Anna. She is referring to the girl who recently had the horrific experience in the comfort room. Pat says she does not understand why she is not allowed to talk to her. Then we observe Pat adjusting her unsmiling picture inside her office. She is our protagonist, the guidance counselor at Santa Lucia. Joyce stands behind to visit her. While they talk, Joyce is upset, saying she should have gone with Anna. She believes her friend would still be at the school if she did. Yet Pat assures her that what happened to Anna is not Joyce's fault. Joyce, however, is concerned that no one is telling them anything. She wishes she had left the school long ago. Pat wants to know why that is, because everything is the same for the girl. That is why she goes to the rooftop to clear her mind. When the bell rings, Pat reminds Joyce she can always come to her. The girl gives Pat a drawing before she leaves. Looking at it, Pat asks why Joyce is sad in the drawing. But Joyce informs the counselor it's not a drawing of herself. Supposedly, it is most likely Pat she drew. At night, in her office, Pat gets a visit from a man she greets as Mr. Fidel. Upon asking if she is working late again, she tells him she does not have anyone to go home to. He gives her something before leaving. After that, Pat sits down at her desk, neatly organizing her items. We see she is a person who prefers order. She then presses the button on the tape recorder next to her. In a short time, her red pen falls to the floor. Retrieving it, she sees someone is now sitting in the seat before her, so she slowly ascends from the floor to witness a girl sitting there. Surprisingly, Pat greets her as Iri and asks her how she has been. From this, we come to understand she has done this before. A girl mysteriously appeared in her room, though Pat reacts to this strange happening with familiarity. Also, Iri must be short for Erica, the girl in the comfort room. Erica tells the counselor she has read every book in the library. She wants to leave the school with Pat and wonders why she can't leave. Pat asks if this is what happens to ones like her. Erica doesn't know, saying, maybe. Pat wants to know what happened to Anna. Erica replies that she didn't mean to do what she did. She also asks why Pat is not afraid of her when everyone else is. Pat asks if she should be, not answering her. The girl says she sees her father sometimes in the corner of Pat's office. That makes Pat slowly start looking to her left, toward the dark corner. Soon enough, the door slams, startling her, and Erica disappears. Pat walks out into the hallway to see her standing at a distance before she vanishes again. That prompts the lady to go in search of the girl. So she enters the comfort room, where she hears someone crying in a stall. Of course, it turns out to be Erica. Pat reaches for her and finds some of Erica's hair in her hand. Afterward, she sees the ghost girl giving her a menacing stare. This causes Pat to wake up in fear in her office. She quickly stops her tape recorder. Then she looks at the wall clock to see it's 2 minutes past midnight. She plays her tape back to hear the conversation she had with Erica. It seems like she anticipated the girl showing up so she could tape it. How did this activity start taking place? Shortly after, Pat calls it a night as she leaves the school. While walking, she notices a nun looking at her through the window. A girl is in one of the rooms, praying with a blindfold on. At Pat's home, she listens to her recording. On it, she summarizes that was her 6th session with Erica. Yet the girl still will not tell her story. Pat wants to know if she could find out the answer to that question, she would know her students better to keep them safe. Back at the school, we see a girl walking alone. She stops to turn around, and we don't see what happens. In the morning, her body lies outside for everyone to see. The police are there to investigate it. Pat wears an expression of confusion as she watches the girl's body getting placed in a bag. Later, in a meeting with all the nuns, Pat says they made the girl stay late as a form of punishment. We realize she was the girl with the blindfold. When the priest asks Pat what she believes happened, the lady acts confused, like all the rest. She says she wants to talk to the children because they might know something. The priest then asks Alice what they should do. According to her, they should mourn today, but tomorrow, classes should resume. One nun reacts concerningly to that, questioning whether that is too soon. The priest reminds everyone that this is not the first time they have lost a child at the school. God has answers for all of this, he adds. Their school will continue to hold its place as the premium Catholic school in the country. Pat interrupts the man to ask how he could say that during such a sensitive time. However, her question is met with silence. Later, a man visits Pat at her office while she's with Joyce. The girl has to leave for him to enter. He introduces himself as Julian, a lawman assigned to investigate the case regarding the girl's demise. He asks her about Fidel. Pat informs him the man was working at the school for a long time. She asks a question of her own. If Fidel is capable of committing such a crime, why did he start now? Julian wonders the same thing. Yet he is still taking Fidel to prison. He wants Pat to call him when she acquires some information. At night, Pat sleeps in her office, and her door opens. A girl runs past the doorway, which causes the counselor to wake up. She searches for the girl outside, where she finds her peeking. Then Pat enters another room to find Erica there. With her back turned to Pat, she looks at the butterflies on the wall, asking how old they are. Pat educates her by saying they only live for a few months. But to Erica, they don't look lifeless. She also knows Pat wants to talk to Clara, the girl who was murdered. Upon getting asked about her whereabouts, Erica questions why she should tell her. She also changes the subject by saying Pat has a nice voice, unlike her mom. At that moment, we get a flashback of Erica sitting in the backseat of a car, while her parents argue in slow motion. It still haunts her decades later. Back in the dark room, the girl informs Pat that someone is coming. When she asks who it is, Erica grabs her arm. This puts fear into the lady. However, Erica soon vanishes. On another day, we hear Alice setting up new rules at the school. Students are no longer allowed to walk around unless they are in pairs. Given that, each of them will be assigned a partner. The main rule is that everyone must be off campus by 6 p.m., including the staff. Those who do not abide by the new rules will be suspended or even expelled. At another nightly hour, Pat occupies her office and notices a nun looking at her from a window far away. She starts running for some reason. It prompts Pat to enter the comfort room. She hesitates to open a stall. Once she does, she has to collect herself. The last stall door then opens slowly. Pat walks toward it to shut it. She can only hope that no one is inside. Much to her chagrin, though, we see someone standing behind Pat as she walks away. Sensing it, she stops to cautiously begin turning around. The person turns out to be Alice, pulling at a rope from a diagonal position. Pat soon observes the horrific reason why she is doing it. Shortly after, the nun vanishes to appear behind Pat with menacing eyes. That causes the lady to wake up at her home. She calls Julian, wanting to know if she could talk to Fidel. Unfortunately, he says Fidel isn't someone anyone can just talk to. Following that, Pat tells Julian she hasn't acquired any information yet on Clara's case. While she's talking, she hears her television mentioning Clara's demise. That makes her end the phone call so she can pay attention to the TV. The poor girl's parents are there, crying about having lost their daughter. Pat sees Fidel behind bars, and it's said that he's being charged with homicide. Afterward, Pat goes to school at night, even though no one is supposed to be there at such a time. She sees a girl there, who quickly runs away. It makes Pat venture inside the building. After she has climbed the stairs, she hears crying coming from somewhere. So she enters a room that has many items covered in sheets. There she locates a girl who is crying on her knees. Pat believes her to be Clara. When the girl turns around to scream, the room becomes completely dark. It forces our heroine to light a match to fight the darkness. Clara is now elsewhere in the room, making Pat search for her again. Soon enough, she lifts a covering to find the ghost girl hiding under a table. But Clara does not want to be looked at. Pat must know who took her life, so she asks her. At that moment, her match goes out. Along with it, Clara disappears. It doesn't take long, though, for her to reappear and warn the counselor that someone is coming. As Pat is leaving the campus, someone calls out to her. It is Alice, desiring to know what she is doing there at such an inappropriate time. Pat bounces the question back at Alice, wanting to know why she's there as well. The nun's reason is to make sure no one is loitering there. Since Fidel the caretaker is in custody, someone has to at least partially do his job. Then Pat asks her what happened to Clara, the night Alice was punishing her. The forthcoming lady adds that they both know A slight argument soon takes shape because of that, until Alice tells her coworker to think about what she's doing. If she sees her there again at such a late hour, she will suspend Pat. On the next day, Pat is in the comfort room. While using the sink, she hears a noise. It causes her to open the door to a stall. In there, she observes a horrific sight. A girl sits, appearing to be lifeless. Overcome with anxiety, Pat sees it as Joyce and attempts to help her before yelling out for help. She later sits in a hospital with the injured girl. The first thing we hear Joyce ask is what Pat is thinking about. It is her brother, who lost his life long ago. As she starts saying what happened, we get a flashback of her distant past. Pat walks into her brother's room as a young girl. She witnesses him lying in his bathtub, no longer of this world. The signs were always there, she says, yet no one listened. Pat is sad that she had to tell that depressing story. Her brother, Anna, and Clara, they are all people she could not save. She doesn't want Joyce to be the fourth one in her life, so she wants her to promise that she will fight through this. All Joyce does is nod her head, in addition to forming an uncertain smile. Can Pat trust this troubled girl never to do this? In the hallway, Julian is there to ask Pat about the girl's well-being. She replies that Joyce can talk now, but still needs to rest. That is when Julian informs her that Clara's case is closed. To them, it is rather certain that. Saddened by this awful news, Pat starts walking away. She does not even try to discuss it. At her office, two girls sit before her while drawing disturbing pictures. It is unknown why they are there doing that. Pat tells them to stop while they quickly scribble, though they don't listen. The counselor has to raise her voice to put an end to their activity. She then takes their papers to connect them. The result is quite unsettling. They combine to make a grotesque face. Upon lowering them, Pat briefly perceives Erica between the girls. Of course, they don't have the same gift or curse to see her as Pat does. Afterward, Pat walks elsewhere on campus and hears a nun harshly disciplining a girl. That makes the kind lady come to the nun to stop her. In doing so, she accidentally knocks her to the floor. To make her situation worse, it is Alice. With that action, we next see Pat sitting in Alice's office. The principal lectures her that she has been there for a long time, yet no one ever questioned their methods. However, Pat says it isn't right to treat the students that way. She adds that all Alice does is talk of discipline when children are losing their lives. Alice replies with further discipline that Pat is suspended. She also says that if Pat were doing her job, Joyce wouldn't have attempted to end her life. It must be hard for the caring lady to hear this, especially since she mentioned earlier her dissatisfaction with failing to prevent those 3 fatal accidents. Following this, Pat talks about Alice with another nun, who tells Pat that Alice has been through this before. What happened to her student was even worse. It was a long time ago, somewhere in the school. Pat asks for the girl's name, but the nun can't remember it. That leads Pat to ask for her help in accessing Alice's files. However, this is a tremendous risk for the nun. She fears suspension. Due to that, Pat decides to do it herself, though not without some help from her friend. Later, while the other nuns are occupied, Pat wears a habit to hide her appearance on campus. She stealthily opens the door to Alice's office. In there, she searches for files until she finds the one on Erica. Then we see Alice walking to her room. Pat will be in major trouble if she is discovered. Along with the file, she finds a film in a small cartridge. When Alice opens the door, Pat tries to hide. The priest ends up saving her by telling Alice to join them for lunch. In the photo room, Pat inspects the film she found. As she scrolls through the pictures, she eventually lands on a photo of a lifeless Erica, which frightens her. At another time, Pat sleeps while being troubled by a bizarre nightmare. Oddly enough, the person who wakes up in fear is not her, it is Alice. Shortly after, Pat visits her to ask if she knows Erica, while holding a picture of her. Standing in Alice's room, Pat demands to know what happened to her and Clara. Alice, starting to reveal herself, says she was a guidance counselor long ago. She asks how someone can help a person who doesn't want to be helped. Erica was like that, according to her. She tried to use the way of God to help the girl, but God wasn't enough. Now she realizes that God doesn't have all the answers. Alice apologizes, seeming genuinely distraught about all of this. Because of that revelation, Pat gets upset, wanting to know why Alice won't let her help the girls in her own special way. All Alice says in response is that Pat tells Erica to forgive her. She should also ask for God's forgiveness for what she's done. Pat wonders what she means by that. Alice says Fidel wasn't the only one who was there when Clara's life got claimed. She starts saying there is a reason why spirits remain on this earth. Yet she was too scared to find out why. She tried to hide the truth that went on in the school. There are things too evil for them to understand, she says. Some souls are filled with so much hate that they wish for nothing except to harm the living. All of this makes Alice cry. She loses her tough appearance there on the bed. In response to everything she has heard, Pat states she is not like Alice. She won't give up on Erica. After that, Julian comes to Pat with some urgent news. He tells her that Erica in the comfort room. 2 years later, her dad strangled her mom outside the school campus. At that point, Pat says she heard that as a rumor from a student. The student she has in mind is most likely Erica herself. Julian further says that Erica's father was sent to the electric chair. He went insane after his daughter's demise. Julian allows Pat to listen to the man's confession, where he says he didn't know why he did it and he had no control. He was filled with a rage he never felt before. The investigator then lets Pat listen to Fidel's confession. He also says something similar, that he couldn't control himself. That information prompts Pat to go to school. Once they arrive, Pat ventures into the school alone. She soon encounters Erica there, whom she follows. She is led into the chapel. Pat hears crying coming from a confession booth, so she enters it, allowing for a needed separation to exist between her and Erica. She wants to understand the motive of the people who mistreated the poor girl. Erica asks if Pat will stay with her. Of course, Pat says she always will. That makes the ghost girl ask a more serious question, if Pat will follow her into hell. She thinks Pat's brother is there, because it's a sin to end oneself. When Erica says people like her should have never been born, Pat assures her that is a lie. No one wanted to be friends with her, says Erica. At that moment, we get a flashback of the schoolgirl getting in trouble in the comfort room. For some reason, Erica's mom cuts her hair short, which Erica considers ugly. It forced her to wear a headdress at school. All of the students laughed at her once her short hair was revealed. She tried to leave the school, but wasn't allowed to, since she noticed she was the only one who was suffering. It made her decide to make others suffer too, so she ended. When her parents came to the school, Erica possessed her father to take her mom's life. She also tells Pat the upsetting truth, that she similarly used Fidel to bring about Clara's demise, though she didn't do it for hateful reasons. She just wanted to have a friend with her in ghost form. Unfortunately, Clara didn't want the same. At that point, Erica asks the counselor if she still wants to be with her. However, she doesn't need to hear her answer because she believes people like her will never understand Erica. She wants all of them to become deceased, starting with the closest one to her, Pat. To hear those words from the girl she wanted to help very much, Pat is overcome with grief and fear. Then she walks out to see Julian not acting like himself. Erica has possessed him. Pat screams in fear before running away. But she can't outrun a ghost. She gets stuck in between her chasers, which makes her run upstairs. Yet Erica is everywhere. It is her school, especially at night. Pat enters the comfort room just in time as Julian gets there. She hides in the final stall. Shortly after entering, Julian knows where she is, so he starts banging maniacally on the door. After breaking it down, he finds she has escaped through the window. Pat runs in the rain outside, yelling for help. Soon enough, Julian comes to bring her down. He starts choking her, while Erica is there, watching. Thankfully, she isn't the only ghost there. Clara is present too, existing as the light to combat Erica's darkness. She runs at the evil girl to bring her down. That makes them descend a respectable distance. Due to this, Julian stops being possessed. He now lies unconscious on the ground. Pat goes to look down to see if the two girls are there. They are not to be seen, so she falls to her knees and starts crying. Pat narrates that she never saw them again after that night. The next scene has the counselor sitting in her office on another day, recording her words. It is now quiet at Santa Lucia, she says. She doesn't have anyone to talk to. She then hears a strange sound from the tape, which makes her drop the device. It is uncertain what that was. Following this, Pat enters the chapel to see Joyce sitting there. The girl is attending a funeral on her own. When Pat observes whose funeral it is, she shockingly discovers that it's her own. At that moment, she realizes she lost her life, being choked by Julian. Afterward, Joyce runs out. Pat follows the girl to the rooftop, where she witnesses she is about to. Joyce starts crying, asking Pat for guidance, if she can hear her. She is about to do it, but something stops her so that only her shoe drops. We see that it was Pat who saved her, as she holds the troubled Joyce. They both sit, crying. Even though Joyce cannot see her, Pat saved her life. She says she will always be there for Joyce. The girl is the one person Pat managed to save. Even in her afterlife, Pat will continue to look after her.